Look, man, you read the title, right? Destroying the ego does not equate to enlightenment. Yes, sir, let me say that again. Destroying your ego does not equate to enlightenment. And you might be wondering, okay, man, I've heard all these people talk about how ego is the enemy, how you need to destroy your ego, how you need to have an ego death to experience this state of enlightenment. And while that is partly true, I'm here to tell you that's just a part of this whole process. It isn't the entire process in totality. So without further ado, let's break this bitch down real quick like a brick for y'all. Now, what even is enlightenment? What even is this whole experience that these spiritual mystics are looking for or trying to achieve? Well, there is no pure definition of it. There is no one concrete way that you can actually describe enlightenment. But if you really look at all the different accounts and anecdotal references to it from people from all over the world, all different cultures, all different spiritual traditions, you can see the connecting dots, you can see the connecting layers that come with this whole experience of enlightenment. And that is not just, oh, I'm one with the universe, all is one is all. That's a part of it. That's the whole process of ego death. But it's actually being able to live and operate within that state while also at the same time be in this material plane of dualism, where things are separated, where things are divided. You see how everything is divided, but you also see how everything is connected. A lot of people think that enlightenment just means that you get to the point where you just see everything as one. You see the divine in all beings, and that is a part of it. That is a aspect of it, but it's also being able to operate within that state in a divisionable state of being. It's being able to stay in those higher states of consciousness while still operating on this lower realm of existence. It's the yin and yang. It's the Shiva and Shakti. It's the Adam and Eve. The left hemisphere and the right hemisphere working together in unison. But why most people think that the ego is like the blockage to enlightenment is the fact that there is a process, an initiation step, an initiation ritual that you must undergo consciously to burn off all the attachments that the ego has created that almost act as an anchor for your consciousness to not be able to transcend to those higher points, to those higher states, to those higher overall planes of existence. This is something on the right-hand path of the esoteric and occult when you're ascending up and you're purifying to actually achieve liberation. Purification is a prerequisite for liberation, but it isn't the ultimate state of liberation. It is a part of the process. And on that right-hand path, that ascending path, it's all about burning off the karmas, burning off the attachments, burning off the things that are pertaining to the ego. Not in a way where the ego is bad, where the ego is evil, but it's breaking off all the nonsense so you can build it back up on the left-hand descending path towards full unification of not just your view of the world, that everything all is one is all, but also in the sense where you can operate in that state of mind while in this realm of reality you can see how everything is separated, can come back together, but also separates again. There is no differentiation in between the two. That's the state of enlightenment where you peer past all the illusions, you peer past all the facades, these labels, these forms, and you are flowing with the divine energy of life. That's what all these different mystics, monks, sages, saints, and all that stuff talk about when it comes to enlightenment. It's all laid out in different formats, different ways, different languages, different overall iterations. But if you break it down, you'll see the correlations in between all of them. So that whole process of an ego death, in my opinion, is like step one, step zero. It is groundwork. That's how you even get the door to even open. And ego death can happen through many different ways. can happen through meditative practices, can happen through a psychedelic experience, can happen through a traumatic overall state or experience or event in your life where you disillusion or depersonalize yourself from who you are, what you think this world is. And it is very intense. It isn't something that you should hop into. It isn't something that you should seek, that I want to kill the ego. That's dangerous. That's very dangerous. And it isn't for everyone. These higher paths of spirituality isn't for everyone. You might be wondering, okay, man, like, who is it for? You have to be a chosen one? Do you have to be this, be that? No, I'm not on that new age spirituality bullshit telling you who you are and what's for you. But I'm saying that some people on this incarnation are not prepared enough for that purification process to dissolve the ego. And they're not even prepared enough to go from that point to the next layer of reintegrating the ego, but now using the ego towards their advantage, towards their overall evolution. This is seen within the concept of Lord Shiva within the Hindu tradition. He's seen wearing the snakes, a bunch of serpents around his neck, almost like this chain. Like, that's the image that you see of him. That snake is symbolic of the ego. He's wearing the ego rather than the ego is wearing him. Let me say that again. He is wearing the ego rather than having the ego wear him. And this is the whole idea of why you need to dissolve the ego first before you can wear it. Let's take it into different examples. Your ego, if you're addicted to weed, you're not smoking the weed anymore. The weed is smoking you. If you're addicted to porn, you're not watching porn anymore. Porn is using you. If you're addicted to food, you're not eating the food is eating you. You see what I'm saying? Because that is an attachment that you have no control over actually choosing to indulge in it or not. A lot of people think the spiritual path is just about being a renunciate. Just completely be like, oh man, I need to wipe my ego away clean. And that is sometimes, for some people, their path. That's what they want to do. That's totally fine. They want to go up that ascending path, stop right there. But for those who want to reintegrate it back to a full circle, full cycle, and be fully immersed within all aspects, right hand, left hand, right hemisphere, left hemisphere, Shiva, Shakti, Adam, Eve, Isis, Osiris, all these esoteric symbolisms of what it means to actually take that burning off of the ego, but then rebuilding it back into a more holistic manner. That's what all of them were trying to point at. That was the great arcanum. That is an esoteric secret of true enlightenment. A lot of people just want to get to that point where they dissolve the ego, Kundalini awakening, psychedelics, all that stuff. And that's totally fine. But after you have a Kundalini awakening, after you have an ego death, how can you reintegrate all that stuff back into your day-to-day life? Because if you don't, like I just said, it's very dangerous. That depersonalization effect that you get is very, very, very dangerous, to the point where you don't know who you are. You get into these weird spiritual depressive states, and you're so ungrounded within the material world that you give up on everything, even though it isn't a true renunciate path. You just cannot operate within this world because you fried it yourself out. You've completely butchered that tether to this material world. And while on the levels of transcending to the spiritual realms of reality, it is about cutting off those tethers. It is about cutting off those attachments, especially after the physical body perishes, so you're no longer anchored to this plane. While you're still alive, you better fucking learn how to use both together, you know what I'm saying? You better learn how to operate in the cold and the hot. And this is something that, again, the whole New Age spirituality movement is kind of fucking up for people. They've built out, they think that they're destroying their ego, but in reality, they're putting in a new ego of not having the ego. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? I have a whole video about this on this channel as well, talking about how having a spiritual ego is a real thing. And if you want more in-depth understanding of all that stuff, especially with the symbolism of Lord Shiva and the snakes, go check out the links posted in the pinned comment down below, because within there you'll be able to find the link to our private Patreon community. Shout out to the fucking private Patreon community. Look, man, if you're enjoying content, topics, and subjects like this, you are doing yourself a disfavor. Yes, you are doing yourself a fucking disfavor by not joining up into the private Patreon community, because within there you'll get access to exclusive videos where I'm breaking down more in depth and more in detail these types of topics, getting into ancient texts, getting into ancient scriptures, really just overall encapsulating all the things that you need to understand along your journey towards self-mastery and towards self-realization. So in there you'll get exclusive videos, full occult lectures, in-depth guides, all that good stuff. And most importantly, if you tap into the Philosopher's Circle, aka the highest membership tier within the private Patreon community, you'll be able to get access to our monthly mastermind live calls. Yes, so we're doing 2 live calls each and every single month. You hop on a call with me, as well as a community of like-minded men who are also on the same path, who are also on the same journey, who also want to achieve their highest potential on all planes of reality, the mental, the physical, and the spiritual. So if you're someone who is also on that path and looking for a community to connect with, this is your spot, man. We got a private group chat. We hop onto these mastermind calls, all that good stuff, all the exclusive content. It can be accessed within the private Patreon community. So check out the links posted in the pinned comment of this video, because within there you'll also find links to other services and products that we provide, such as links to our personalized coaching program, one-on-one consultation calls, free community Discord server, weekly newsletters, all that good stuff posted in the pinned comment of this video. But like I was saying, for the people that are watching this channel, the second channel, the private Patreon community who might be working with me one-on-one, hopping on to consultation calls, there is a process of understanding and maturization. Is that a word? Hopefully you just made it up if that isn't. According in the dictionary, Fulani made that word. Maturization. Jeez. Sounds hectic. Sounds amazing. There's this whole process where, as you go along this journey of enlightenment, of spiritual evolution, where the ego is no longer controlling you. Your attachments are no longer controlling you. Your carnal nature is no longer controlling you. But you start to learn how to control it. It isn't about killing off the lower level chakras, the lower states of consciousness. They have a time and place. If you believe God, the universe, or whatever you want to call it, is all-knowing, omnipotent, omnipresent, why would this design be there in place for you to have these lower states of consciousness, to have these lower level chakras, to have these lower level planes of existence? Because they have a time and place. It's just the fact that the ego doesn't understand it, because your level of consciousness is stuck on those layers. There's a barrier. When there's a barrier, that's all you know and that's all you operate under. You can't achieve those higher states, even though you have ability and accessibility to tap into those. The human mind is capable of doing that. The human experience is capable of tapping into that. The animal does not have the ability to do that. That's why they're stuck just thinking about survival, sex, and status. But for a man, if you're only thinking about survival, sex, and status, does that mean you're evil? Absolutely not. It just means you're stuck in that cage, in that barrier of your lower states of existence. Yet you can tap into the higher levels through that purification process on the right hand ascending path, which is all about purification, liberation, and burning off those attachments. Because when you burn off those attachments, you open up the doors to these higher levels, higher chakras, higher states of consciousness. And that whole process is a piece of this entire journey itself. But learning how to get to that point, be mastered, control the self, control your cravings, control your carnal nature. It's about learning how to use it then towards your advantage. That descending path. Learning how to use sexual urges, aka your libido, towards your advantage. Learning how to use hunger towards your advantage. Learning how to use these dark aspects, the shadow self, if you want to call it that, towards your advantage. Even in psychology, Carl Jung talks about this whole process of individuation, which is their whole reference of enlightenment, self-realization, That's their own definition of it, individuation. It's about taking all the aspects of the self, unifying it to the point where you are fully identified and individuated within your being, all aspects of it. There is nothing that's neglected in your overall being. But you're the one in control of it all. That's true enlightenment. That's true self-realization. Being able to tap into any file cabinet of your psyche, of your body, of the spirit, whenever you want. You're the one controlling it. You're dictating it. You have become your own quote-unquote God. You pick and choose what it is that you want to indulge in. You pick and choose what you want to renounce. Just renunciation, killing the ego, ain't going to give you the full spectrum, ain't going to give you the full circle, ain't going to give you the full overall capabilities that true enlightenment actually provides you. So when you see these different people talk about enlightenment this, enlightenment that, and I'm not saying I've reached that stage. A lot of people think that, oh man, you can't speak about these topics if you're not enlightened yet. No, I'm out here on the journey towards enlightenment, documenting the process along the way, helping you guys understand different details that I wish somebody told me earlier. Because when I was going through this whole process of ego death and all that stuff, I thought, oh man, I reached enlightenment. When in realization, when I got back into these different types of texts, different types of understandings, philosophies, and spiritual traditions, it made me realize that was just fucking part one. Your spiritual awakening is just part one of the journey. Your ego death was just part one of the journey. There's a whole process beyond that. There's a whole layer that you have not touched yet. And that's probably the most important part. Yes, getting started is important, but actually finishing the whole journey, which there is no end point, there is no pinpoint, detailed checkpoint that you need to get to finish enlightenment. But you know what I'm saying? You're picking up what I'm putting down. There's another layer to this whole journey, another layer to this overall evolutionary process. It isn't just about killing your ego. It isn't just about being pure. It isn't just about being someone who's holy and all that stuff. It is a part of it. But it's able to use that holiness, that purification process in this material world that is unholy, that is unpure. It's about being fully involved within this world without being attached to any of the things that are pulling you different ways. You are the master of this reality, but you're still a part of this reality. You're still a part of it. You're still engaged in it. You're still overall engrossed in it, encapsulated into it. You have not eliminated it. And this whole process goes on to every part of this journey. Like, think about it when I talk about don't desexualize your mind when it comes to this whole practice of semen retention, which is part of the purification process. Stop trying to think that sex is bad. Stop trying to demonize sex. Stop trying to demonize women when you're on semen retention. It's not about thinking that those things are evil, indulging in those lower level pleasures are evil. It's just about not being a slave to them. It's about being in control. And that ego is the one, when it's programmed against you, that is pulling you in ways that you don't truly want to be in. That's why it needs this whole process, the prerequisite of actually being able to liberate it through the path of purification. But once you've liberated it, it's about piecing it back up together towards a way where it's working for you. It is your servant rather than your master. The whole quote from Osho is, the mind can either be a beautiful servant or a horrible master, and the mind can be correlated to the ego. That's what it can symbolize in this whole analogy. It isn't about killing the mind, killing the ego, but it's about like taming it to the point where you're the one calling the shots, where you're the one calling the overall and dictating the decisions. It isn't a process of just wiping away your ego and you're good to go. You're enlightened. Even Buddha, who is like the popularized version of a archetype who has attained enlightenment, he went the full ascetic path, which was about renouncing everything, starving himself, almost killing his entire physical vessel to achieve enlightenment. He went the opposite way too. He was living in a way of just indulge. And he found the middle path. He started off at the indulgent level, went all the way to the ascetic level of renunciation, two polar opposites, two polar extremes. And then he went back to the middle point where he can indulge in the world while also not being attached to it. See what I'm saying? That's the state that true enlightenment brings. You can indulge in all the lower level desires while not being attached to them. That's true enlightenment. And whenever you hear about this stuff online, these people will make it seem like it's only that state. It's only that level. It's only that part of the pole. Part of the process. They forget about reintegrating all these things back into this vessel, back into this experience. So just keep that in mind, bro, because ego death, whatever, is only the starting point, in my opinion. Your awakening could be the starting point. The ego death could be the first checkpoint. But then reintegrating that back is the essential part that pieces everything together and makes it whole, makes it in unison, makes it together, holistic. That right-hand path, the ascending path, and then going back down the left-hand descending path, you put it all together. That's when you're truly involved and engaged within the world without being attached to it. And within the Hindu tradition, they call these people Jivan Muktas. Jivan Muktas, one who sees the divine in all beings, who is completely detached from all the engagements within the world. He's not accumulating karma anymore, and he's following his dharma, but he's still fully engaged within the world, fully involved within the world, fully even indulging within the world. Could be drinking alcohol, could be doing drugs. And you'll be like, hey man, he's an enlightened being. What do you mean he's doing drugs and alcohol? Having sex, doing this and that. He's not attached to it. I'm not saying that's what you should do, get enlightened and drink alcohol and drugs and all that, but he's fully in that presence where he can engage within this stuff without it being a hindrance to his overall capacities and his higher states of consciousness. He's operating on that level 24/7, 25/8 at all times, at all places, in all states, at all different phases. It doesn't bother him. He's unfazed. This is when you really see these enlightened teachers where they really just do whatever the fuck they want. There is no, again, like I said in the beginning, there's no definition, a description of what an enlightened being really looks like. What do they act like? What do they do? It isn't about just being some saint in the caves of India and just meditating. It ain't about that. You might be operating and engaging with someone who is an enlightened being at your day job, at your 9 to 5. He might not know it, but they are in that state. There is no prerequisite, there is no clothes, there is no look that these people have. And there is no one way to get there. There's certain principles, certain tenets, certain directions, and overall guideposts along that path that is universal, but is different for each and every single person, because each and every single person has different things that they need to purify and different things that they need to reintegrate to themselves. It's like almost taking like a vase or like any piece of art, smashing it. That's the ego death part, purification part, and then bring it all back up together. But now it looks even cooler. Now it even looks better because you've designed it yourself. It wasn't prepackaged and pre-programmed by wherever you bought it. That prepackaged, pre-programmed version of it is your psyche, your mind, your consciousness, through all the upbringing of the past of who you are. This is what you do. You need to break all that in order to rebuild it back up together within your way of actually designing your reality, your world, your overall vision of what you want out of this life that is given to you by a higher source, your dharma, your duty, and bring it back into this world. That's the whole process. That's the whole journey. So I don't think that you just break the vase and you're good to go. Fuck no, you're not. Build it back up together, better, stronger, and overall more aligned and attuned towards your inner programming that is already given to you, that's already understood and aware, but it's just hidden by all the nonsense and bullshit of the external world. You need to burn off all the nonsense and bullshit of the external world to be able to see that. But then once you see that, it's about reintegrating it and getting back into the world. Now the nonsense and bullshit can't even faze you. You don't even see it no more. You're performing spiritual Aikido. Dodging, ducking, weaving. It don't even bother you. You're in the Matrix and doing all the moves that Neo does without even trying. Because you've programmed yourself to that point of being in that state where nothing in the external can affect the internal. Yet you're still engaging fully in the external. Am I making sense? Are you picking up what the fuck I'm putting down? Hopefully you guys are, because like I've said so many times, people who especially watch this channel are more psychologically and spiritually mature on their path to be able to grasp these ideals. They actually be able to pick up and grasp these concepts that are a little bit more advanced, a little bit more far-fetched for some people on the general path of spirituality, general path of new age, mainstream bullshit. They can't really conceptualize that. But for you, who's on this journey, who's on this overall path, realize that, man, that the ego death is just a little part of it. It ain't the whole thing. When you zoom out, you realize, oh man, it ain't the whole thing. And trust me, I've been in those states. After an ego death, I was like, oh man, I gotta tell everybody about this. This is true enlightenment, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, that all simmered down. I realized, okay, man, that was like less than a wake-up call of being able to actually purify myself even more, but now naturally not needing an external things to do that, so I can achieve ego death naturally in a gradual process, but now also being able to reintegrate all these things back into my life in a more holistic manner. That's what it's all about. That's what you really should be viewing this whole process as, rather than one way, one form. It's a cyclical process. And it ain't gonna happen just one time. You might do it one cycle, you gotta do it again, another again, until you really stop the entire cycle in totality. Just like you stop in the cycle of samsara. So, just keep that in mind, man. Don't get caught up in this whole nonsense of once you've destroyed the ego, you're enlightened. That's another ego that's blocking you from true enlightenment. Because again, it's not about destroying the ego. But it's also not about creating a new ego that is still blocking your way. It's about taming the ego. Making it submit to your will, the will of the spirit, rather than the will of the senses, rather than the will of the external. It submits to the will of the internal. So it's not about taking away somebody's weapon. It's about breaking that weapon, building it up to the point where that the weapon itself is not pointing at the person anymore. It's being wielded properly. But you got to break it first. You got to break it first to rebuild it back in that point. Wearing the ego, like I said in that video on the private Patreon community, wearing the ego like an ornament, like a necklace, like a chain, similar to Lord Shiva. If you want, again, more info and details on this whole kind of topic, check out that video on the private Patreon community, how to cultivate a healthy ego. And I want to go more in depth and more in detail in these types of topics. So again, man, if you're interested in all this type of information, you want to be around a community of like-minded men who are also on this path, this is the place for you. Do not be selling yourself short, bro. Curate your community. Enhance your environment. That's what it's all about on this path to enlightenment. So once again, let me reiterate this. The ego is not your enemy on this path to enlightenment. It is actually the key on this whole journey, on this process. But there is a phase where you need to learn how to transcend the ego and break from all the attachments it causes. But then there's another phase where you need to relearn how to build it back up and piece it all up together in a much more holistic manner where it's working for your advantage rather than towards your demise. Take that information and apply it to every other attachment that you have. It isn't about giving up these lower level desires. It's about using the energies, the consciousness associated with it for higher level pursuits. That's what it's about. That's what you really need to embed into your mind. And this ain't coming from me. Go check out all these true spiritual masters, true enlightened beings who actually encapsulate this in a much better fashion than I can. And again, if you want to see all that stuff, that's what we do in the private Patreon community. So if you want to hear me break down their perspectives and actually get into these ancient texts, ancient details, ancient scriptures, there it is for you. The ego, killing it off, does not equate to enlightenment. It's a part of the process, but it isn't the entire process in totality. Keep that in mind. It's been your boy out here in the field, in the flesh, dropping y'all that game so you guys can make these gains, and I'm out here. Peace.